Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting our series looking at Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And these are my commentary videos. So these are the videos where we're doing a deep dive into the major quotes that you need to know, analyzing a bit of the language and structure, adding a bit of context to those. If you haven't read chapter 1, Story of the Door, recently, please make sure you read it before you watch this video, because I'm not really explaining the plot as I go through this. I'm literally going through the quotes. As always, you can speed these videos up, slow them down, pause them as you need to. I really do think you should be adding these notes to a paper copy or adding them to a sheet of paper, something like that. Okay, so yeah, let's get started. Story of the Door. So as I said, chapter 1 of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is of course a Victorian novel, and it is particularly a Gothic Victorian novel. It also has some elements of kind of a detective novel. Detective novel, what the heck? Don't know why I can't speak, but yeah, it's got elements of a detective novel as well. And the first thing that we're introduced to, because remember, the first few chapters or scenes are often what we know as exposition or expository, right? The first thing we're exposed to or learn about is this guy called Mr. Utterson, who ultimately becomes the main character, even though the book is called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and ultimately becomes something of a detective. And he's an interesting guy. It says that he was never lighted by a smile. The use of the semicolon also adds a sense of emphasis to this. The idea that there's almost like an awkwardness sometimes when you're talking or in the presence of Mr. Utterson. He's never smiling. He's cold, he's scanty, and almost embarrassed to talk. So kind of shy. Embarrassed in discourse kind of means he's shy to talk or open up to people. He has a backwards nature in terms of his sentiment. He's lean and long and dusty and dreary. All of these, this is a fairly long list, isn't it, of fairly negative adjectives, really. You don't particularly want to be dusty and dreary, right? But then for some reason, there is a juxtaposition, which is the fact that despite the fact he never laughs or smiles or, you know, he seems shy, embarrassed to talk, he's somehow lovable. So he seems like a bit of an interesting, paradoxical character. There's these interesting kind of contrasts or juxtapositions in his character. He's also a really good resemblance of the Victorian era. So remember, for your exams, you need to include a lot of context, and that's often called AO3 in your exams. Some of you, it will be called AO4, but context. So he represents the Victorian gentleman. The Victorian times was they were highlighted in terms of strictness, very strict moral code, very repressive kind of culture. And he represents that perfectly when he says that he was austere with himself. Basically, he was very strict with himself. And although he did, drink some gin while he was alone, it was very common in that time to have a little nightcap, a little drink before bed, that sort of thing. He drank the gin to mortify a taste for vintages. Now, vintages means wine. So we see he's very strict with himself because he won't allow himself to enjoy the things that he wants to enjoy, like wine, for fear that he might become an alcoholic or drink too much. So yes, he does drink, but he drinks something he doesn't like that much, gin, so that he'll only have a glass or, a shot or a small amount, right, that he can sip on, rather than wine. So do you see that this already starts to bring in another idea, which I'm going to have to write really small, but it's repression. It's one of the major themes in the novel is repression. So he represses the things that would make him happy, because he's worried that he would end up drinking too much, becoming a drunk, yeah? And this all links to the idea of a Victorian gentleman, okay? He is a lawyer, and quite often he ends up being the person that is the last good influence in the lives of downgoing men. Now, a big part of this novel is also the idea of sort of good versus evil, morality, that sort of thing. And interestingly, Mr. Utterson's name is actually Gabriel Utterson. And Gabriel might link to the angel Gabriel. So in this quote here, where Stevenson says he's the last good influence in the lives of downgoing men, I personally think that this is talking about the idea that he is this kind of positive, angelic, good sort of influence in the lives of the criminals and, potential criminals that he helps legally as a lawyer, right? So there's that link to angel Gabriel, since he's Gabriel Utterson. And this, I think, also creates a little bit of what we would call foreshadowing, because ultimately in this novel, he ends up being the last good influence in the life of a downgoing man known as Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll is on a downwards trajectory. There are bad things happening to him. and it is Gabriel Utterson, Mr. Utterson, that actually tries to help him. And we see one other major thing with Mr. Utterson, which is the fact that his friends were those of his own blood, so his family members, right? Or those he had simply known the longest. Stevenson then uses an interesting simile. His affections, like ivy, were the growth of time. So we get this sense of the loyalty of Mr. Utterson, because Mr. Utterson is basically the kind of person that he doesn't try to be friends with people that can benefit him, or be friends with people that he, is trying to get something from. Instead, he focuses just on the people that happen to already be in his life and nurturing those relationships. And it's ivy, I might be wrong about this, but I think ivy grows relatively slowly over a long amount of time. And then obviously ivy can be very beautiful, right? There's maybe a little bit more of a deeper meaning to this, because ivy also, you can think of things like poison ivy. Lots of ivy is poisonous, right? I might be analyzing a little bit deeply there, but that's what the exam wants, right? So you can think about how his loyalty and the depth of his relationships grows slowly over time, and it's very difficult for Mr. Utterson to give up on someone. And that again adds a lot of foreshadowing, because as we go through this novel, we'll see that Mr. Utterson has every reason to stop being friends with Dr. Jekyll, to stop helping Dr. Jekyll, and yet he's loyal all the way to the end of the novel, despite that. We're going to leave it there for this first part of chapter 1, and then we're going to do a part 2 of chapter 1. So I'll see you in that next one. Thank you.